We are now moving on to Cair Konig. Cair Konig, one of the two places named Cair. However, the other place that was named Cair, Cair Dinaval, had a castle. As you can take a look here, there sadly is none. There used to be a Cair, but oh so long ago, orcs ruined it. But once again, that is just one of those many info dumps. You can go ahead and dump on the players should you desire, but I'm willing to bet more often than not, most groups don't really like that lore dump that doesn't pertain to the story at all. Let's go ahead and take a look at Cair Konig in a nutshell. We have a 2 in friendliness, a 2 in service, and 3 in comfort. Even though this place is located very far away, it's located very far up north and there's nothing beyond, this place is actually relatively decent. So it does make for a pretty cool place to visit, it does make for a great place to start the campaign. But, unfortunately, because it's so far out of the way, it is more than likely not going to see a lot of foot traffic. But should your players arrive there, they'll be in for a great time. The population is 150 people, so a pretty decent amount of people. The speaker of the town is Speaker Trovis, who is a Silver Dragonborn veteran, a retired adventurer, and then he took an arrow to the knee and decided to stay right here. He is not like a lot of other speakers. He's not loud and boisterous and talking about politics and stuff. He's really just all about drinking and patrolling the town. Which, he's pretty good at those two things, drinking and patrolling the town. That's kind of what he does. For a militia, we have the possibility of 25 soldiers being mustered and 2 veterans. Once again, pretty sizable amount of the population getting ready to fight. Not bad at all. The heraldry here, we have a white fish, and that is symbolizing the town's fishing prowess. They basically did a lot of trade with the other 10 towns up and down that lake. But lo and behold, you need to actually have a moving lake in order to do fishing and ferry stuff. And that's not really happening right now. The sacrifice to Oral in this town is food, meaning that every once in a while people go hungry, and that sucks. But that's a lot better than going cold, and also very important, it's a lot better than, sacrificing people, because that sucks. The rivalries listed here is Cair Dinaval and East Haven, which once again, they are the 3 closest towns to each other here, so I guess that sort of makes sense in their rivalry, but it sucks to be rivals with your neighbors. For locations in Cair Konig, we get some decent amount of, explanation on what's going on here. We have the Hook, Line, and Sinker. This is a tavern, it got a really cool theme to it. The reason why it's called the Hook, Line, and Sinker is because the hook is, as soon as you walk in the door, you get a free mug of ale given to you right then and there. That's the hook to get you in. The line is the fact that you'll drink it and realize you want to drink more, so you'll drink, you order 2, 3 more rounds, and that's the line. And the sinker is that every single night there is a drinking contest here. And that's definitely the sinker because during this drinking contest, people are getting good and liquored up and ordering a lot of drinks. There is sadly no rules listed here as to how this drinking contest goes. But I would strongly recommend that if your players come here and partake in this drinking contest, you do something maybe just as simple as every single one of the PCs makes a constitution check or a constitution saving throw. And if they go up against the commoners or whoever these drinking champions are, they do competing cons as well, and you see who succeeds the most and wins. Another named location, we have Frozenfar Expeditions, which is basically an adventurer's outfitting store, which does make sense. This place is located just on the edge of civilization. So it makes sense that, people, if they wanted to go out into the wilderness, would go ahead and stop by here. And there's a nice little shop here, and it's owned by a tennis Swift, who sells adventuring gear. A tennis used to be an adventurer, but he has gotten older and doesn't adventure quite as much. So I would strongly recommend that because he used to be an adventurer, and if the players, go ahead and outfit themselves before going out into the wilderness, that a tennis maybe gives them some tips. Maybe it says, oh, hey, you want to avoid going near mountains. You want to, make sure to stay away from that one tribe. Maybe even they say, oh, hey, I spotted some landmark, but I never got around to actually going to it. Maybe you can go there. A tennis is a really great way to feed rumors to your parties and not feel like it's super expositioned onto them because it makes sense that this person did actually go out there and did actually do things. And lastly, for named locations, we have the Northern Light, which is an inn. And the reason why it's called the Northern Light is because there used to be a magical lantern that basically shone and created all these fantastic lights. However, when your players arrive, they're going to realize that it's not there anymore. And the reason for that is because the lights have been stolen by some Duergar, which will totally lead into the quest that this town provides, which is a pretty neat little quest. The inn is ran by two sisters, the Shorard sisters, and it says that they bicker amongst each other, but at the end of the day, they are good sisters and still work together. But they are going to be very important for the quest at hand because basically there's going to be some roleplay dialogue that you have with these sisters while you're also talking to the speaker of the town. So before I get into the quest here, it makes a lot of sense that this place is the stepping point for many adventurers out into the Raid Glacier and out into just the absolute wilderness all around of Icewind Dale, because this place is, you know, possibly the closest you can get to the wilderness. So you should really play that up. There should be like an air of adventure and an air of frontiersman-likeness to this area. They should definitely present themselves as more boisterous people and, you know, proud people, and maybe there should be other adventurers just like your PCs that are about ready to go on expeditions out into the wilderness. Cair Konig definitely shouldn't be one of those sad and miserable places. It should be one of the louder and more, you know, friendly places. And you can totally reflect that by the fact that there is the drinking contest still going on. There is, you know, this town speaker that walks around and actually, you know, is drunk all the time, is willing to talk to the party. Definitely play up the air of friendliness, but don't make it seem, you know, creepy friendly, just, you know, good and nice friendly. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the quest, The Unseen. The Unseen, as you can tell here, and as soon as we pop this up, there is basically a Duergar outpost. But how do they get to this Duergar outpost? Let's take a look. When you want to push this quest onto your players, the town speaker Trovis is going to bump into the players and say, oh, pardon my manners, I'm Trovis, the town speaker. I'm a bit jittery because there's a lot of thieves, you know, around here, a lot of thievery going on. He then goes on to explain how a whole bunch of things have gone missing. The immediate suspicion is the fact that they might be dwarves who are coming here from the Dwarven Valley and are stealing things because they might be going hungry or cold. However, they are not quite right. They think it's dwarves, but it's actually Duergar. Duergar are coming here and stealing things, and they're way better than dwarves at doing it because they can go invisible. A small list of things that have gone missing include the colorful light at the inn, which gives the Northern Light its name, a pair of goats stolen from the local tavern, and a small sack of pearls carved into a decorative beads gone missing from the stores of the Frozenfar Expeditions. The unfortunate part about telling the players all this is the fact that if the players, you know, really want a reward, he's going to say, hey, you know, unfortunately a lot of the valuables in town have already gone missing, so we don't really have much to repay you with. So I'm willing to bet that there's some scumbag groups out there that are not willing to go on a quest if there's no, you know, monetary reward. So I would recommend that if you have one of those groups, that you definitely say, hey, we don't have anything, but if you go ahead and retrieve it, we'll go ahead and give you back some of the stuff that you retrieve. Maybe some sort of incentive to to appease the thirsty for gold. Trovis will eventually take the group to the Northern Light Inn, where they can meet with the sisters and see where they are more than likely going to spend their nights in this town, because it is, in fact, the only inn. And the sisters will basically just be talking to them and explaining how things are going missing and how they suspect the dwarves. If and when your players accept this quest, they will be led out back where they can find some footprints that potentially lead to Kelvin's cairn. It's funny to note, though, it actually does state if your players refuse to accept this quest, then the town is going to be continued to be harassed by these Duergar, as they are just totally ransacking the town. Should your players accept this quest, they actually get told, hey, maybe you should get a dog sled so you can traverse the snow a lot quicker, and to get told, hey, maybe you should go get a dog sled. And when your players actually go to get a dog sled, the person running the store, Jothra, actually does say, hey, maybe I can actually accompany you. And that is actually a really cool way to, you know, get the players involved with more NPCs around the world by having them go on expeditions with them. But also mechanically, Jarthra is really powerful because she gives advantage on survival checks. The reason why this advantage on survival checks is huge is because your players are going to be following these tracks and eventually see that the tracks disappear because of the wind. So your players are going to have to make a group set of survival checks in order to try and keep on the tracks of these Duergar. And what it states is if the group fails twice in a row, then you roll up an encounter, and it is possibly during a blizzard. So definitely a way to, not necessarily punish players for bad rolls, but, keep it interesting, like, oh, maybe they get a little lost here and there. But eventually, they should be able to follow the foot tracks and make their way to the Duergar outpost. So I've been talking all this time about these Duergar have basically come to this town and stolen a whole bunch of stuff. But who are these Duergar and why are they stealing stuff? Well, the Duergar, their leader of this little group here, is actually the son of the king, so he's essentially the Duergar prince of the region. And the reason why he is stealing all this stuff is because he is looking for Chardalyn. He's looking for black ice because he wants to appease his dear old dad and get a whole bunch of black ice and send it back to the fortress so that they can go ahead and build the Chardalyn dragon. We get a nice little section here on how to roleplay the Duergar. For those of you that have never roleplayed a Duergar, never fought them or anything, Duergar are essentially dwarves, but just flat out better. They can enlarge themselves at will once a day, and they can go invisible, meaning that they can be sneaky and they can be dangerous in combat. These Duergar are tough and not willing to negotiate. They will fight to the death, unless they are captured, of course, and they don't want to back down. However, they are smart. They're not, dumb creatures. They are willing to deplace, they're willing to fall back, they're willing to regroup, they're willing to, fight intelligently, because more often than not, they're going to be just as intelligent as the PCs are. But they are going to be individually strong, so taking that into consideration on what level they come into this fight with, because every single Duergar has a decent amount of HP, on average 26, and a decent enough AC on average 16 here. So really, really big. And once they enlarge, they actually deal an additional die of damage, which is pretty scary. So your players follow these tracks and either get lost and get into some other encounters or make their way straight to the outpost. And what do they find? Well, fortunately for this quest, we get a really cool map. So let's go ahead and dive right into that, shall we? When your players approach, they'll be able to see that basically built into the side of a foothill here, there is an outpost. And it looks really cool, there's a whole bunch of turrets to the side and a whole bunch of arrow slits and a large door and sort of like a small moat. But, of course, there is Duergar overlooking this thing. So how do they approach? Well, fortunately, the Duergar that are watching this place are somewhat unattentive. They're kind of just here just as, necessary. They probably aren't suspecting that people are going to be, traipsing around all over the frozen tundra to try and get to these people. So they are not on full watch. So as long as your group makes just a group stealth check of DC 10, then they can slip right past all the defenses and make their way to the front entrance. However, should your players either not go stealthily or they have some type of light, either like a torch or a magical light, the Duergar are going to be able to spot that, and thus they are going to retaliate here. In Area 1, we have the bunker, which is the sort of like turret that is outside of the outpost. And there's a whole bunch of arrow slits and basically a trap door that leads to the inside of the fortress. The Duergar sitting inside here is named Brojk. By the way, every single one of these doors is going to be having a name, but more often than not, that's not going to be relevant. This Duergar in particular has a heavy crossbow, so he is going to occasionally look outside and poke out and shoot at someone. It doesn't state here at all what that means, but because he is inside a turret, essentially, and is shooting out of arrow slits, he is going to have cover, and what that means is that because he's got 3/4 cover from being inside here, he's going to have a +5 to his AC. A 16 plus 5 equals 21, meaning that if your players want to try and shoot at this guy who's, shooting at his arrow slits, that's going to be a monstrous thing to deal with. 21 AC at the beginning of the game. These guys are only level 1, 2, or 3 when they're doing this. That is really scary. So what they're going to have to do is, if they earn the ire of this Duergar, they're going to have to just basically go around and get to where the Duergar simply can't shoot at. In Area 2, we have the main keep. Basically, it details out how your players are able to lift open the gate and make their way inside. And this is made worse if they've already alerted the Duergar, as they will have raised the bridge. But your players still have a way to get inside. They could go through this little river, frozen river, and climb up the well. It seems like a very big oversight to a, defense system, but whatever. Inside this room, they'll be able to see that there is different pathways in which they can take. But also very important to note is the fact that there is cages, and in these cages are the goats that were stolen from the town, but also an ogre zombie. This ogre zombie is disgusting. This thing has 86 HP. It has a +6 to hit. It's going to do a ton of damage. It's going to soak up a ton of damage. But fortunately, if they came in here stealthy-like, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to simply sit in the cage. The only issue is if your players have already alerted the Duergar are going to open up the cage and basically sick it on the PCs, and that is going to make this fight terrifying. So hopefully your players have chosen stealth as, a somewhat primary attribute here. If they have not, then I would strongly suggest that discretion is the better part of valor, because going up against multiple Duergar and an ogre zombie at low levels is terrifying. In Area 3, we have the Overlook, which once again, one of the Duergar, this one named Urtild, can go ahead and look outside. So your players are going to have to stealth past not one, but two Duergar. But hopefully, once again, that's not an issue. Your players will see that this Duergar is just chilling here. No pun intended, of course. And what's interesting to note is if you want to, instead of going through the main door or going through that well, it says here that there's bars, and if someone is willing to make an athletics check, they can bend the bars to allow someone to squeeze through. In Area 4, we have the Armory, which is pretty neat. If your players are able to make it here without much incident, silencing Urtild and not causing a commotion, they can see that there's a whole bunch of cool weapons and armors in here. We have, scale mails, and we've got steel shields and war picks and javelins and climber scale. I have all the stuff, which, depending on the campaign that you run, can be great, or it can just be, table setting. But also, if they got in here stealthily, then once again, they can go ahead and go through the trap door and silence this Duergar before they are able to alert more people. So really leads into the whole factor of, do you want to do this stealthily, or do you want to do this, forward-facing and yelling? In Area 5, we have the Chokepoint. The reason why it's called the Chokepoint is because this is where the Duergar will retreat to if they take damage, and will try and reconvene with all the other Duergar. But also there is a neat little trap here, which the Duergar will use to their advantage. Basically, when the lever is pulled right here, two spike walls will basically jut out and try and smack anyone that is along these doorways here. And the reason why that's significant is because it'll, one, hit anybody that's in the doorway, unless they make a DC 12 dexterity saving throw. But more so, it'll clog the doorway, and if the group is separated, then the Duergar can go ahead and pick on other people. The doors are a pretty big deal because, one, if you split the party, then that's just bad news bears for whoever gets split up. But also important is the fact that if people want to get through these things, because let's say you have martial people on either side, if they want to get through, they're gonna have to break down this door, and it requires a destroying something that has an AC of 15 and an HP of 18, which at lower levels can be kind of hard to do. That could theoretically take 3, maybe even 4 swings. Really not pleasant. In Area 6, we have the Commander's Quarters, and this is where Nildar Sunblight, the prince, is going to be residing. Basically, he's got all of the loot that he's stolen here, and he's got some journals that offer exposition and actually feed into other little adventures, like this one that says, "Brother, you will find me in the Frozen Ferry in East Haven. From this new base, the search of the Charlatan continues. Long may our father reign over the dark land." Let me tell you what, I've got a brother, and I would never, say, "Brother, we will do this together, da da da." But obviously, every single fantasy, creature ever always does this. So whatever. That letter, of course, can lead you to the other Duergar prince in Easthaven, but we will be getting more into that once we hit up Easthaven. Nildar, being someone who is, intelligent, doesn't want to die. So he will either try and kill the PCs, and if killing the PCs doesn't look like an option, he will actually go ahead and try and retreat because he wants to get back to dear old dad. So there is a nice little thing here, though, that talks about defeating Nildar. If your group is able to capture Nildar, meaning they, drop him down to 0 HP or whatever, and they don't kill him, then they can go ahead and try and interrogate him. The thing about this interrogation is it gives you this big old prompt of, what he says. My father is more powerful than you filthy creatures, blah, 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 blah. It says that you will soon learn that my father unleashes the terror upon 10 towns. Your doom soars upon dragon's wings. So if you have Nildar spill the beans that, oh hey, we're collecting all this Charlin to make a dragon, that kind of takes a lot of the excitement of the exploration out of the way. I personally would recommend not letting it slip that there is a Charlin dragon in this adventure, because I think that's way more fun to see with the eyes rather than just hearing about it on potentially what could be the very first quest of the entire campaign. So I would probably omit that. I would probably say something along the lines of, yeah, you will soon learn that there will be a terror unleashed upon 10 towns. Like, that's cool, that's ominous. But saying that your doom soars upon a dragon's wings, that is a little too on the nose. So I would just recommend getting rid of that last sentence, but still keeping it ominous and terrifying. If he escapes, he will go ahead and head right back onto Sunblight, which is the Duergar Fortress located in the Spine of the World. And I would strongly suggest trying to somehow find a way to get Nildar to survive, because reoccurring villains are a lot more fun than one-off villains, in my opinion. In Area 7, we have the Spore Servants. It really should be named like the Cell Block or something, but it's called the Spore Servants. And the reason for that is because the Duergar are doing some nasty stuff. They have taken people and are experimenting on them with myconid spores and turning them into basically, zombie servants. These Spore Servants were either 10 towners or ragged nomads and have been captured and basically zombified. So it might look like they are real, but what you should probably describe is the fact that these people move unnaturally. They maybe have some weird fungal stuff growing all on their skin. They just attack without remorse, and they feel no pain because they are undead. What it states here is that as soon as PCs walk in, they'll be attacked by these things. And like I said, you should probably say, oh, these 5 people attack you. But then once they get up close, that's when you begin to describe what they look like, what they sound like, and what they smell like. In Area 8, we have the Duergar's Quarters, which is, of course, where they are just, taking naps. And lo and behold, the Duergar that are here are just chilling. If the group made no noise and haven't been into loud combat, then they're just going to continue to be here. But if the alarm was raised, then these two are going to go ahead and rush out and join the fray. There's a decent amount of loot located all around the crates and stuff around this room, like a whole bunch of gold, some weapons, and a potion of healing. Not bad at all. So before I get into concluding the quest here, I'm just going to go ahead and just give a brief little, roll over the events that could possibly happen. If your group arrives here and just either fails their stealth roll spectacularly, or they just don't think about it and continue to have a light source on them, then they're going to be in for a rough time. They're going to have someone plucking away at them with a heavy crossbow from the outside. And like I said, they're going to be hard to hit. They're going to have a 21 AC. And even if they do get hit, they still have, 26 HP. So, really scary stuff. This person's constantly shooting. And if they try and storm the main gates, then they're going to be in for a worse time, because by the time they probably run up there, because it's going to take, let's take a look here. If they are just over here, let's say, then they're going to have to run all the way up here, 120 some odd feet. That's going to be a couple of rounds. And by the time they get there, the Duergar can already, react in time and start moving around, unleashing the ogre zombie and getting into a fighting position. So I would strongly recommend that if you have a newer group of people and they are lower level, then you should definitely be able to tell them that, hey, maybe running away isn't always the worst idea. So live to fight another day, sort of thing. But if your group charges headlong in, then they're going to be in for the fight of their lives, because Duergar individually are tough, and that's even made worse by the fact that there could be multiple Duergar and an ogre zombie in the fray. Should your players be able to move stealthily, they'll be able to basically hug along the door here to the side and basically go right behind the Duergar with the crossbow and go underneath the Duergar that's on the outlook up here. Go right in and then start making a mess of things, because they'll be able to look around, and maybe they accidentally just go ahead and go over here and tackle Nildar first. That can lead to a lot of fun implications. If the group stealths their way inside and all of a sudden just jumps Nildar, then maybe if they're smart enough, they can, use Nildar as a bargaining tool, or maybe they just go ahead and kill him. Once again, I would strongly recommend that you tell your players that, hey, you don't always have to kill, enemies. You can knock them out, should they desire. All in all, this is a pretty cool little dungeon. Really not too complex, but the way you can tackle it can certainly lead to a lot of fun, a lot of stealthing around, and depending on which area you take, maybe your group charges right in and then immediately, hunkers down in a corner somewhere and uses the terrain to their advantage. Maybe they don't know how many Duergar there are and find themselves in the middle of a sandwich of getting flanked. There is a lot of different ways they can handle this, but I would strongly recommend that they be at least level 2, if not level 3, when tackling this adventure. Once your players have defeated all the Duergar and looted up the place, they can return to Cair Konig, where they can say, hey, it was Duergar that were stealing all that stuff, and maybe your group learned that there was some Duergar shenanigans going on, and potentially learn that there is a Duergar menace all around Icewind Dale. The minimal reward from this quest is that you get a night's place to stay at the inn, and you get some ale, which isn't that big of a deal. But your group could probably take a whole bunch of stuff from the fortress and still make a pretty good living off of the basically rewards that they got from there. Looking at Cair Konig, I really like this place. It's got a nice feel to it. I like the frontiersman-esque style of it. I like the quest involved here, because it can definitely lead into the further parts of this campaign. I love sowing the seeds of adventure early in a campaign, and having the prince of one of the main villains in this campaign like this early can be pretty cool, because either one, the group captures him and maybe interrogates him and brings it back to town. Maybe he gets away and, laughs and cackles off in the sunset. Or maybe the group kills him and now they have earned basically the ire of one of the major villains. There's a lot of ways that they can handle it, and there's a lot of ways you as the DM are going to basically have to reciprocate what's going on further down the road. There really isn't much more to say about Cair Konig other than it's a nice little quest and a nice little area. I strongly recommend that your group makes their way at some point, even if it is further out of the way. Now another town that doesn't get to see much light because it's located so far away from the rest of the place is Dougan's Hole, commonly referred to by my group as D-Hole. Lovely name. And it's a lovely name for a lovely place. This place is pretty gross. The place has only got a population of 50, and what's really gross is, if you read into the description, it says that these people are incestual. It is not a fun time here. It's some creepy stuff. For Dougan's Hole in a nutshell, we have friendliness 1, services 1, and comfort 1. These people don't take kindly to your folk around here. They don't see many people coming around here, and more often than not, people don't want to come here, and that speaks for itself. With a population of 50, the place is dwindling, and unfortunately, they are marrying each other's cousins and brothers and stuff. It's pretty gross. For the leader, we have Speaker Edgra Dermot. Edgra Dermot seldom attends the Council of Speakers, which implies that, this is basically like a small tribe kind of setting where the people, sort of vote on things. For a militia, we can muster up 12 whole soldiers and 1 veteran, which, 12 tribal warriors and a veteran is better than nothing. For our heraldry, we have a fish crossed like an X and a monolith in the back, and that is to symbolize the local mystery and the fish that represent bounty. Pretty weird stuff. The sacrifice to Oral here is warmth because they don't have much food going on and they don't have many people to sacrifice, so it makes sense. I personally would rather be cold than hungry though, but that's just me. The rival for this town is Goodmead, which is the town next over, and that probably makes sense because Goodmead probably gets a way better reputation than this place. This town is severely lacking in named locations because we only get 20 stones of Thruun. Basically, there is 20 stones, 19 of which surround one stone on top of this little hill here. And basically, there is a small little story behind it that no one knows why these things were built. Some people think that basically it's a monument to an elemental, and some people think that this Thruun character is a god, but they don't really know. So you might be thinking, oh hey, there's this mysterious thing that no one knows the reason why it's here. It's gotta be important, right? No, there is nothing else written about it anywhere in this adventure. I strongly suspect that there is going to be people doing a lot of fun stuff with this, though. You can definitely tie this in with some weird Cthulhu mythos. You can tie this in with some ancient and lost god. Maybe there's something buried underneath here that some entity wants. Maybe the Duergar are going to come here and steal something. Maybe there's an ancient and lost technology built right underneath it. Who knows? The possibilities are endless. But don't let the book basically dictate that this is nothing, because it certainly could be something. While this town is left with little in the regards of named locations, the quest around here is actually semi-interesting. We have Hold Up, and the reason why your players will be basically put on this quest is because they might arrive in Dougan's Hole and discover that this place is actually getting sieged out to some degree. There is a pair of winter wolves named Koran and Kanan. The winter wolves have kidnapped 2 children from the town and are trying to entice the adventurers into going to the Giant's Lodge. The denizens of the town are basically going to go ahead and say, oh yeah, these wolves, they aren't just any normal wolves. They are intelligent and they're big and they're scary. These winter wolves are gross. And, veteran players are going to recognize that what winter wolves can do, but newer players probably won't. Winter wolves are intelligent beings. They can talk, they're huge, and they're, most important of all, deadly. Individually, of course, they're strong, not just because they're big and they can bite people, but they have a freaking cold breath attack that can hurt people. Really scary stuff. Once your group has either decided to help out or maybe even chosen not to help out, it doesn't really matter. Once the characters basically leave the outskirts of the town, they're going to be approached by the wolves. And the wolves are going to go ahead and put on an act. These wolves are natively evil, but they are going to try and put on a little ruse. The wolves are going to say that their evil master has been kicking them around and doing all these terrible things, and their master, the giant, is the reason for all their issues. So the wolves are going to say, hey, come along with us. We need your help. And one of them is going to be limping, and players that are insightful enough are going to be able to see that the wolves sometimes forgets which leg they're limping on. If the players try and confront the wolves about this, then the other wolf is going to go say, hey, you better go to this lodge, and going to bare their fangs. Unfortunately, once again, for lower level PCs, going up against not 1 but 2 winter wolves at this early in the game is deathly. Winter wolves can just automatically kill, a single winter wolf could kill a level 1, group. So I definitely would recommend having there be some fail safes in there. Maybe having the winter wolves actually injured to some degree. Maybe this pack of wolves that is mentioned later comes to the group's aid to some degree. Definitely have something in mind because unfortunately, at lower levels, the game is scary, and throwing monstrous creatures like winter wolves and what we're about to see in a moment here is a very big deal. Once your group approaches the lodge, the wolves are going to say, oh hey, our master isn't home. You should go in right now and free those kids. We'll stay outside and guard the place. Once again, your players can, read into their thoughts if they roll an insight check and see that the wolves are lying. But whether they're lying because they're afraid of seeing the master, or of getting beat up or whatever, they don't know. Something you always got to remember as a DM is that insight is not read thoughts. Insight doesn't automatically mean that you know what they were thinking and know what they're doing. Insight is more along the lines of, spotting a little tell of, that they're lying or they're full of it. It's not like you can automatically know what they're thinking. So why did these Winter Wolves lead the group all the way here? Well, it's because they wanted to basically sacrifice the group to the mammoth inside. There's a mammoth named Norsu who is sad and distraught because the giant is dead. Yes, that giant, that master that the wolves have been complaining about, has been dead for a while. And the wolves are basically using this distraught mammoth to their advantage and getting these people killed. So with that little bit of background information, let's go ahead and dive right into the areas. Area 1, the exterior, is just that. It's the exterior. There's 3 front entrances to this lodge here, and they can either go left, middle, or right. The choice on which way your group goes is kind of a big deal, because if they go left, they can go ahead and see the kids. If they go down the middle, they'll go ahead and face the mammoth. And if they go down the right, they can potentially try and sneak past the mammoth. In Area 2, we have the Flensing Chamber, and this is where the giant would basically, have a whale in storage and carve it up. I imagine it would smell somewhat gross and probably be gross. There's an interesting treasure in here, and it is basically a scrimshaw goat, small enough to fit in a character's hand. The scrimshaw goat is worth 25 GP. However, the only way it states you can get to it is by 1 hour of chipping away at the ice before you can open up the chest. So, obviously, just sitting there, spending a full hour chipping away at something doesn't seem like something they would immediately do in this scenario. That is something they would do later on. Or maybe they have someone that is casting fire spells and melts away the ice. But that's probably something that they are going to do after they deal with the mammoth and the kids and the wolves. In Area 3, we have the caged Townfolk, and this is where you're going to find the 2 kids named Silja and Finn. They're basically in this cage. Obviously, they only did so much with the art. It does look like they would be able to, just squeeze right through. But it does specifically state that the bars are just thin enough that they cannot, pass through them. So how are your players going to be able to open up this cage? Well, your group has 2 options. Either 1, they bend the bars, or 2, they use thieves' tools. The way in which your group can bend the bars is by applying heat to it and then having someone try and strongman it and pull it apart, in which case only needing a DC 15 athletics check, and then the people can slip right through. But if they try and open it up using the good old thieves' tools, it's going to take a minute because it's so big, and a DC 15 dex check with the thieves' tools, which isn't that bad. But opening up the gate causes the rusty hinges to squeal loudly and causes Norsu, the mammoth, to come rampaging out and determined to kill any interlopers. I would strongly recommend that if they don't particularly look for something that would make noise that loud, then you go ahead and say, hey, the hinges are rusty. And if that's not good enough for your group, maybe you just ask for a, investigation check to see if, opening up the gate would cause a bit of noise. In which case, if they do find out that it'll cause noise, then they'll need a flask of oil in order to lubricate it and not cause a noise. Basically, you need WD-40 to make sure that you don't get killed. Before I get into all the particulars about escaping with the kids and all that, I will go through all of the areas here because all of that will be wrapped up near the end. In Area 4, we have the entrance corridor, which is just that. It's just a little corridor your group can go down. If they are trying to go about this stealthily, they will need a DC 15 stealth check to try and not alert the mammoth. In Area 5, we have Garagai's Icy Tomb, and this is where your players are going to realize that they've been duped. They will be able to see the hacked up frozen corpse of the giant, as well as a weeping mammoth. The reason why this mammoth is weeping is because it is another one of these awakened beasts that your players will be able to find all around Icewind Dale. I really like all these awakened creatures because a mammoth is scary on its own, but an intelligent mammoth, that would be terrifying. Once the group makes their way in and the mammoth sees them, the mammoth Norsu is going to say, you are the reason for this, and basically assume a threatening posture. The reason for that is because Garagai, the giant, was slain by a group of adventurers, and unceremoniously, some of their loot was taken, like the giant's great axe. So this mammoth thinks that your group is possibly one of the people that did this terrible thing. Fortunately, your players won't have to fight this mammoth if they are quick thinkers. They will have basically one round to either try and deceive the mammoth into thinking that it's their friend, or persuading the mammoth into saying, "Hey, we'll avenge your dead master." If your group does not succeed on these DC 12 checks, then unfortunately, I'm going to tell you that's a TPK. There is no level 1 and no level 2 group that is going to be able to handle going up against a mammoth. This thing instantly kills people as soon as it hits it. And so it's just literally round after round, it's going to murder someone. And also very important to note is the fact that your group isn't going to be able to outrun it. This mammoth is just as fast as the rest of the group, and it's just going to go ahead and just charge them down. It's going to gore them, it's going to stomp on them, and it's going to murder them. So if you are running one of those groups that doesn't quite think quick on their feet, if you're running one of those groups that never thinks to try and talk down the foe, if they are one of those groups that thinks that they can always handle any situation through sheer combat alone, then unfortunately you are going to have to change this encounter, because quite frankly a mammoth is going to mop the floor with any level 1, 2, and 3 group, and there is no realistic way a group is going to be able to handle it. Hopefully your players talk the mammoth down and are able to explore more of the Icy Lodge, because there is several cool things to note in here. One of which is the Ice Throne, which is located right here in this room. And what's cool about this Ice Throne is that if you sit here, you can actually activate a blizzard that engulfs the local area around you. When the blizzard is activated, it affects the region within 1 mile, and it lasts for 8 hours. Pretty cool effect. Sadly, it probably isn't going to get that much use. In Area 6, we have the War Room, which is basically a room where some of the giants would basically converse about, such matters of being giants or whatever else giants talk about. Unfortunately, of course, there's no more giants left. They're all either, gone or killed or whatever. When your players walk in here, they'll actually be able to see something. They'll be able to see, sadly, a dead Chewinga. Because unfortunately, there is 3 kobolds that are sitting in here, and they are, going hungry, and they're scared. They're scared of the winter wolves, they're scared of the mammoth, so they're just sitting here and they're terrified. The kobolds didn't really mean to kill a Chewinga, they were just scared when they saw the Chewinga, so they killed it and are totally sad about it. And it states that the kobolds are just, they're non-combative toward the group because they're only 3 kobolds. They know that they're not strong. So they're going to say, hey, help us out. We just want to be free and all of that. And it's really cool here. It states that the kobolds are either 1, going to just run away once they are freed by the players, or 2, they're going to go ahead and join along with the players. I strongly recommend having these guys as some sort of, funny gag group that joins along with the group, because having more NPCs join along with the party is always a lot of fun. You can use them for future adventures. You can get them killed. You can use them to be kidnapped. And you can even recreate the picture of having these 3 kobolds in a trench coat and have them walk around town. The sky's the limit with 3 kobolds. In Area 7, we have Garagai's Bedroll, which is literally 2 sentences about the giant used to sleep here, now the room's unoccupied. I feel like they could have just rolled that into one of the other areas. Information, but whatever. In Area 8, we have the whale oil storage, and of course this is where all the oil is stored. And my oh my, is that a lot of it? 500 pounds, and it can be sold in 10 towns for 50 GP. Only issue is, how the frick are you going to carry 500 pounds? I guess there's technically, that person that's going to say, oh, I'm a Goliath and I've got the strong back feet and I can carry this, and that. I mean, I guess that's technically possible, but I know I wouldn't allow most groups to be able to carry 500 pounds worth of crap. But what is interesting about this area is the fact that there is a Reamer has hole. Basically, at one point, a Reamer has burrowed in the place. And fortunately, it's gone because It's very fortunate for your players because Reamer has are disgustingly strong. Like, I think they're like CR 11 or 13, somewhere around that ballpark. And they're really scary. And fortunately, your group can actually earn a little bit of money here. Because as the Reamer has tunneled its way through, it left some of its Thrime here. And Thrime can go for basically a lot of money. A bottle of Thrime sells for 250 GP. And anybody that's proficient with it can try and ascertain its true name and purpose. And they can discover that the reason why Thrime is so big is because you can make potions of cold resistance out of it. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you give your group potions of cold resistance in this campaign, this might be one of the few campaigns where potions of resistance actually get used. So now that we've talked about all the locations here, we've got sneaking out. So your group came here to save these kids, and hopefully they should know that these winter wolves are, just full of it. They're lying to the group, and they're being all secretive and sneaky about it. So maybe they should hopefully catch on that these wolves are just not on the up and up and should be able to deal with it somehow. Unfortunately, like I said, your group probably isn't going to be able to handle dealing with winter wolves in combat. And you should probably express that. You should probably say, hey, I've heard stories about winter wolves killing like 20 people at a time. Maybe, hint at the group and saying, hey, these things are not something you really want to fight. And should probably be not dealt with in combat. So your group gets these kids freed, and then what do? The most likely outcome and the probably best solution here is to sneak out. How are they going to sneak out? Well, fortunately, there's that Reamer has hole, and if they sneak out of there, then they can make it back almost no issue. It does state that the trip back to Dougan's hole can be uneventful, or you can roll for a random encounter using the Wilderness Encounters tables. If the winter wolves are still alive, they attack the party as soon as the random encounter ends before the characters have a chance to rest. That automatically will kill any level 1, 2, 3, maybe even a level 4 group, honestly. If they have to deal with some sort of encounter where presumably they're going to be using resources and taking damage, and then they have to fight not one but 2 winter wolves, easy TPK. Throw that out of the window. Like, TPKing the group just because they're doing the right thing really sucks. Like I said before, if you do want to throw the winter wolves at the group, you need to nerf them to some degree. You need to maybe buff the encounter to some degree. Maybe, something comes along at the last moment and it helps the party out. You need to do something because just purely as is, winter wolves are going to trounce any low-level group, especially after already going through an encounter. One recommendation I could have is maybe the players could convince the mammoth that, hey, adventurers weren't the one that killed your master. It was those wolves. Those are the real bad guys. And then instead of it just being the PCs versus 2 winter wolves, it's the mammoth versus 2 winter wolves. And that could be an epic fight. You could definitely just roll off and the players could see, oh, hey, if we'd gone up against the winter wolf, that thing would have done 20 some odd damage in a single hit. Yikes. If we had gone up against the winter wolves, oh, it would have breathed all that cold breath on us. Yikes. That is probably one of the better outcomes and, a lot more climactic and epic and stuff. Don't just kill your players for no reason. Once the group makes it back home with the kids, they are rewarded. Really terrible thing in here. It literally states in the treasure, Hilda married her older brother, who was a hunter. The incest stuff is just creepy here. Regardless, the treasure is a pair of the boots of the Winterlands. This is huge. If you give this early on in the adventure, then everyone is going to probably be coveting this thing because my oh my are they massive for this adventure. They give you resistance to cold damage, they let you ignore difficult terrain, and they let you survive in low temperatures. So if you're playing this game as a hardcore simulation and they have to go up against the elements all the time, having one person not have to worry about those elements is a pretty big deal. And also, spoiler alert, cold damage comes up all the time in this adventure. So having someone resistant to cold is a pretty big deal. Very, very good reward. However, if you run this quest purely as written, that reward is never going to show up because all of your group is going to get killed. My final thoughts on Dougan's Hole is that it is a place out of the way, and it's a good reason it is out of the way. It is a terrifying place, it is a scary place, and it's a creepy place. Most groups don't want to interact with the incest Most people don't want to go anywhere that it's not exciting. Most people don't want to go up against Winter Wolves at levels 1, 2, and 3. Most people don't want to go up against an Awakened Mammoth at levels 1, 2, and 3. So definitely, if you want to run this little portion of the adventure, you are going to have to seriously sit down and modify it so that players actually make it out alive.